Well, I've known Ray, I can't even think how long, but it goes back to the Reagan administration when we both simultaneously received uh, awards for entrepreneurial excellence at the White House. And so we met in the White House, and we've been close friends ever since, occasionally contending over various issues, but I've learned just a tremendous amount from Ray over the years. He's just an incredible fount of creativity and inventiveness and inspiration. He's, of course, you all know, he's a world-leading inventor. He invented the first CCD flatbed scanner. Did you know that? The first omnifont optical character recognition machine. The first print-to-speech reading machine for the blind. These are all the precursors of AI that Ray created. The first text-to-speech synthesizer. And then he's famous, of course, for the Kurzweil music synthesizer, which Stevie Wonder popularized, and the first music synthesizer capable of recreating the effects of a grand piano. It was tested. You couldn't tell whether it was a regular grand piano or the Kurzweil. My mother, who was a pianist, doubted that, but as far as I know, she never proved Ray wrong. And also the first commercially marketed large vocabulary speech recognition software. And he received a Grammy for the Kurzweil synthesizer and outstanding achievement music technology. And he received the National Medal of Technology, inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. And then he wrote books. This is what really impresses me. I'm a writer, and Ray is just a terrific writer. On top of all these technical and mathematical and capabilities, he is an amazing, inventive, original writer. And The Singularity is Near and How to Create a Mind were terrific New York Times bestsellers. But he also wrote Danielle. You might want to read Danielle. It won Young Adult Reading Awards, and it really was a fascinating novel that he wrote. And of course, now he's a principal researcher in AI, visionary at Google. Ray Kurzweil.
Wow, it's wonderful to be here. I'm sorry I can't be with you in Bellevue, but I'm glad I can join you from my studio here in Boston. I'm very honored to be here with George, my long-term friend and colleague. Invited me back, and I'm looking forward to a lively conversation. As George mentioned, we actually met at the White House. That was quite a long time ago. I've spoken at COSM a few times, last time in 2019. And as you mentioned, I just written a novel about a precocious girl named Danielle, who uses her intelligence and accelerating technologies to solve the world's biggest challenges. Now, 4 years later, we're seeing the power of exponential technologies come to life. I grew up with a fundamental belief, actually going back to when I was 5, that ideas can change the world. That's the only thing that can change the world. And to this day, I continue to be convinced of this basic philosophy. So no matter what quandaries we face, whether they're related to business or health, relationships, the great social and cultural challenges of our time. There does exist an idea that will enable us to prevail. And that's what we should do. We can and must find that idea. And when we find it, we need to implement it. So that was Danielle's philosophy that guided the book, and it's also mine. So I've applied this philosophy to artificial intelligence for 61 years. That's actually longer than anybody else. I got involved in 1962. Only 6 years before that, artificial intelligence was actually named. I actually don't like that name because it implies that the intelligence we get from AI is not real, but it is real. It's based on human intelligence, and we're actually mastering human intelligence. Large language models are already better than what we can do. I mean, who can write something intelligent about anything you ask it? Uh, it wasn't clear back then that neural nets could do anything useful. But now, 61 years later, in my case, they're showing the potential to change the world. So just in the past year, we've seen incredible progress with large language models. I actually don't like that either because it implies that it has to do with language. They're very good at language, but they're also good at a lot of other things. But things like GPT-4 or BARD. And a year ago, LLMs were experimental. There was none on the market. They didn't actually work that well. Now there's scores of them, and they're doing things that were previously impossible. Today, you can have hundreds of billions of parameters, and they can, for example, learn language translation, not by being taught it, just by processing text in different languages. They can translate text into code. They can actually be a programmer. And they're getting better and better. They can create and merge images with language. They can solve problems that require sophisticated understandings of things like inferences and analogies. So I mentioned I don't like the term large language models because they aren't just limited to language. They're actually large event models. They can be applied to anything. Medicine, I'll talk more about that because that's very exciting. Manufacturing, energy, farming, basically everything we care about. So AI is exactly where it should be right now to achieve human level intelligence by 2029. So that's something I predicted 24 years ago in my book, The Age of Spiritual Machines. So once AI reaches human level capability, it will at the same time soar past us in every way. I mean, already large event models can talk about anything. No human being can do that. We aren't going to be left behind. We're going to merge with the technology that we're creating and move forward into the future together. So when I made that prediction 24 years ago, Stanford University was so alarmed by my prediction, they organized an international conference to assess it. So AI experts came from around the world, and actually 80% of them agreed that a computer would match human performance eventually, but they thought it would take 100 years. And we've actually done this poll now every year. It kind of stayed at 100 years. I stayed at 2029, which was started out at 30 years. But AI, since then, particularly recently, has advanced exponentially, and the consensus has fallen in line with my original prediction. So the last poll showed that AI experts now think it's going to happen by 2029, basically matching my original prediction, which I've maintained since 1999. So this is my graph of the most powerful computers in the world. It's reached this turning point because of the exponential growth of computation. And I started tracking this trend 40 years ago. So take a look at this chart. It plots the price performance of computation since 1939. And as you go up the chart, it's exponential. Each level on this chart is 10 times greater than the chart below it. So a straight line represents exponential growth. But look at how predictable this is. I started analyzing this 40 years ago. It's a smooth trend with no interruptions, despite major world events like World War II or economic depressions. You don't see any example of that on this graph. So the first point here, 1939, it was actually the first programmable computer called the Zusa 2, created in 1939. It performed 0.000007 calculations per second per dollar. So Zeus was a German. He apparently was not a fan of Hitler, but the computer was shown to Hitler, and Hitler and the Nazi Party saw no military value to computation. A very big mistake for them. Because the third computer on this chart is the Colossus, created by Alan Turing and his colleagues. So Winston Churchill immediately saw the value of this. He got very much behind Turing, actually protected him, and the Colossus computer. He felt this computer would be key to winning World War II, which it was. The British got totally behind it, and they used it to completely decode Nazi messages. So everything that Hitler wrote or read was also read by Churchill. So even though Nazi air power was actually several times that of England, England used the Colossus to win the Battle of Britain and provide the Allies with a launching pad for its D-Day invasion. And you could really say this computer saved England and Europe. So there are many stories behind this chart. It almost looks like someone's behind this. They saw the chart and they saw where it should be the next time. But for the first 40 years, nobody even knew that this existed. It just went on an exponential trend. And this is actually true of everything. So no one was even aware of this trend until, as I said, I presented it 40 years ago. And I predicted it out, and it's actually gone very much on this continued exponential trend. It's gone from telephone relays to vacuum tubes to transistors to integrated circuits. Now, people have called this Moore's Law. That's really not correct, because Moore's Law has to do with integrated circuits. It started actually decades before Intel was even formed. Of the 80 best computers in terms of computations per second per dollar, only 10 of them have anything to do with Intel. The chart goes up on the upper right-hand corner to the Google Cloud TPU v4, which for the same amount of money, instead of 0.00007 calculations per second in 1939, it's now 50 billion calculations per second per dollar. So that's quite an advance, all with constant dollars in the past 80 years. And if we look more closely at the past 13 years, the amount of computation devoted to training the best AI models has on average doubled more than twice a year. That's a 10 billion fold increase just since 2010. So, I mean, a year ago, it was not strong enough to do large language model. Now, a year later, that's taking over AI. After 80 years of exponential growth, computational power has finally reached a tipping point, and it's allowing AI to do pretty amazing things like large language models. That's why LLMs have emerged this past year, not the year before. So one of the most profound near-term implications of the exponential growth of technology is the vast acceleration of progress in creating new medications for diseases. That's actually, I think, the most exciting opportunity. And let me give you an example. Nearly all functions of the body are carried out by proteins. They are the building blocks of life. Their unique individual shapes dictate the success or failure of all medicine. So for 50 years, scientists were aware of this. We actually produce a one-dimensional sequence of amino acids. And finally, at a certain point, that the linear sequence of amino acids folds up into a three-dimensional protein. It's called the protein folding problem. And people have actually studied this. A small number of researchers were able to do this they weren't very successful, getting maybe 20% of them correct. So in 2022, AlphaFold 2, it's an artificial intelligence model created by Alphabet's DeepMind, shattered all expectations by predicting the structures of basically all known proteins, not just in humans, but in all of nature. And this marked a profound step forward in medicine because it unlocked information that we need to synthetically produce proteins with the desired function. For example, proteins that will stimulate our immune system to fight cancer. And we're actually seeing that now. And this was not possible even 5 years ago. Dennis Hassabis, who headed up this work at Google DeepMind, has launched a new lab that's going to perfect this. To using AI, they're processing and modeling vast amounts of genetic data to pinpoint medical solutions in 1,000th the time it used to take traditional methods. For example, many of you have probably taken the Moderna COVID vaccine. That was actually created in 2 days. We actually wrote down all the different things that might inhibit COVID vaccine. It was actually several billion different possible things. We actually test, the way it used to work is we would test one thing, it would take a year, then we might modify it, take another few years, and if you're lucky, over 10 years, maybe you'd get a medication. They tried all several billion, and that took 2 days. And at the end of that, they had the ideal thing, and that is what we've been using for years. It then took them 10 months to test it on humans. We can actually do away with that. We're going to test it on simulated humans, or can actually test it on millions of humans in a few days as well. But it was the exact sequence that they had found using AI in just 2 days. So we're now going to test medications on simulated humans, again, taking only a few days. Biomedical simulations like this are not going to be limited just to viruses like COVID. They're going to work on every possible human disease. As medicine continues to merge with AI, it will progress exponentially and ultimately solve every medical problems. As I said, 1,000 times the speed of conventional techniques, which we've just been using. So you may have read in the press that I was predicting humans will achieve immortality by 2029. That's not exactly what I said. As a result of protein simulation and simulating biomedical interventions, by around 2029, most diligent people, I think everybody here is a diligent person, will reach what I call longevity escape velocity, the point where we're adding more time to our remaining lives than is going by. So right now, as you live through a year, you use up a year of your longevity. However, science is also progressing, so today you get back about 3 to 4 months from breakthroughs in scientific progress. So you only really lose about 8 or 9 months of longevity in a year. However, scientific progress is on an exponential curve, as I've said, and it's speeding up every year. So by 2029, that's 6 years from now, when you live through a year, you'll use up a year of your longevity, but you'll get back an entire year from scientific progress. So you'll be staying the same as far as your longevity is concerned. Past 2029, you'll actually get back more than a year for every year. So you'll actually be going backwards in time as far as your health is concerned. So at that point, we'll be able to go way past today's average lifespan. This doesn't guarantee you'll live forever. You could be a healthy 20-year-old with many decades of longevity ahead of you, and you could die tomorrow, maybe in an accident. But it does mean that our longevity will keep up with us, ultimately solving aging. And we're also doing away with many accidents. For example, human-operated cars cost us today, just in the United States, 40,000 lives a year in this country. It's millions of lives across the world. But with self-driving cars, this number will decline by about 99%. So we're actually overcoming accidents as well. I think longevity escape velocity will start with people who are diligent about their health. And again, I think all of you should be in that camp. Eventually, it'll become routine. For kids today, or even people in their 20s and 30s, it's not going to be difficult to reach longevity escape velocity. I've actually had some tough conversations with relatives who are almost 100 years old, and I tell them we're working on it as quickly as possible, but I don't think it's actually going to work for that generation. I actually had an aunt who died this year. She was 98. She was actually a psychotherapist, and she actually had a full complement of patients that she talked to on a regular basis. And she was quite cogent. And I talked to her 2 weeks before she died. And she said, this longevity escape velocity that you talk about, could we please hurry up with that? It's kind of her joke, but it was a serious comment also. We're already making profound progress in fighting cancer. One exciting advancement, for example, is an immunotherapy drug called dostarlimab. It was tested in a small clinical trial of 14 colorectal patients by Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. After 6 months of treatment, every single patient in the study received the drug, including people with stage 4 cancer, had all their tumors disappear, and they have not come back. This is the first time that's ever happened. Usually you make 20% gain or 30% gain. Every single one went away. So they're testing it now on lots of other types of cancer. And there's lots of other things that are very promising. AI is spreading through every industry, not just medicine. We're going to see breakthroughs in lots of different fields, including manufacturing, energy, farming, education. Education is very old-fashioned. We really need to speed up with that. Once we get to 2029, the world is going to change very, very rapidly. I think it's important for people to recognize that exponential technologies are propelling innovation forward in all aspects of our lives. And we were just talking about that. The only difference between things in the past, like railroads made us much more efficient, but it took decades. This is now happening not in decades, but in months. So it's going to be very, very quick. I hear people say they don't want to bring kids into the world because they think things are worse now than ever before. That's really not accurate. Not everything is good, but it's much better than it used to be. People think that things are getting worse when they're actually getting better. And in this new book, which you'll be getting from us, I've got 50 different graphs that show progress in every aspect of our well-being. Declining poverty, longer life expectancy, increased income, literacy, education rates. So here's, for example, a poll where people think that things are getting worse when they're actually getting better. I could give a whole speech on this topic alone. So for today, let me highlight just a few. This chart shows the result of a poll. It was 24,000 people in 23 countries. They were asked whether extreme poverty has gotten better or worse over the past 20 years. 70% thought it had gotten worse. Only 12% thought it had gotten a little bit better. The reality is that poverty has actually decreased by 50% over the last 20 years. And that was a prediction of only 1% of the people who responded. We've got lots of other polls like this. I'll just show you a few of these graphs. We've got 50 graphs showing dramatic progress in everything we care about. Here's declining poverty rates worldwide over the past 200 years. These are literacy rates by country going back to the 15th century. Here are the average number of years of education around the world since 1870. 1,000 years ago, European life expectancy at birth was just in the 20s. Actually, 1,000 years ago, life expectancy was 20. In 1800, it's 35. So many people died in infancy or youth from diseases like cholera and dysentery, which are now easily preventable. By the middle of the 19th century, life expectancy in the UK and US had increased to the 40s. Now, as of last year, it has risen to about 80 in much of the developed world. So we've nearly tripled life expectancy in the past 1,000 years. We've doubled it in the past 200 years. And this was largely achieved by developing ways to avoid or kill external pathogens, bacteria and viruses that bring disease from outside our bodies. And I could go on about that. This chart shows average personal income in constant dollars. This is not to do with inflation, since 1929. If you go back 100 years, certainly 200 years, life was extremely difficult, and there was no government programs that could support that. Our income in constant dollars has gone up, while our work week has gone down. It's shot up slightly after the Great Depression, but it's continued to go down since then. This is one consequence of increased automation, but we actually have more people working than we've had in the past. In 1800, I could go through all the jobs, 80% of which had to do with livestock and farming. And I would say all these jobs are going away because we now have 2% dealing with farming, and yet we produce much more food. So we're actually, and so people say, well, where's our jobs going to come from? All the jobs we have today did not exist back then. In fact, they didn't even exist in 1900. This has to do with democracy. It's not perfect. There's places where we don't have democracy. About half the world lives in a democratic country, but a little over 2 centuries ago, there was only one democracy. You go back 2.5 centuries ago, there was no democracies. There are players in the world that aren't democratic, but the number of democracies has gone way up. We're banding together. Keep in mind that we only had one democracy, as I said, 2 centuries ago. As AI spreads through every industry, the true value of products will be the information that they contain. The cost of meeting our basic needs will drop dramatically. For example, in energy, we're actually, if we were to take 1 part in 10,000 of the sunlight that falls on the earth, we'd meet all of our energy needs. And we're actually now, we're creating more energy through solar and wind than we are through oil and gas in this past year. And it's actually an exponential curve. By the 2030s, we'll be able to meet all of our energy needs that way. There'll be an open source market for printed clothing, housing, food created with the help of AI, vertical agriculture. This will be a great economic leveler. So by the early 2030s, providing for your family's basic needs will become relatively easy. Then in about a decade, it will be inexpensive to live at a level that's considered luxurious today. Conversely, the quality of life for almost all humans would be considered miserable today, even 200 years ago, as I mentioned before. Historically, humans have had to compete to meet the physical needs of life. But as we enter an era of abundance, when material necessities are available to everyone, our main struggle will be for purpose and meaning. As artificial intelligence masters all human skills, values will shift from individual skill sets to things like entrepreneurship, creativity, adaptability. So to thrive in the future, we'll need to explore our interests, find passions that we care about. We'll be able to use all the values of life. A large language model can actually express everything that's ever been done by all humans. We need to rethink old business models and create new ones that don't exist yet. It's going to take courage to let go of old linear assumptions. People still think in linear. They think something took 30 years in the past can take 30 years in the future, and that's just not correct. Future jobs are not going to look like current jobs. Just think back 15 years ago. Who knew that you could make money being a social media influencer and lots of other types of jobs that didn't exist 15 years ago? As we get into the 2030s, and certainly the 2040s, our bodies and brains will no longer be limited by our biology. We have a certain size brain that's enabled human beings to dominate the world. We also have a thumb that enables us to create technology. We're going to merge with the technology that we're creating to enhance ourselves. This is not an alien invasion of intelligent machines from Mars. It's actually creating what human beings have created, but we can actually master all skills that every human being has created. It's evolving from within us, not separate from us. We're creating it with our values, knowledge, and beliefs. It reflects who we are and enhances all of our abilities. If we build it to mirror ourselves, we will trust it and it will trust us. And it'll be part of who we are. It'll be an extension of ourselves. It will hold our values. So trusting AI will be just like trusting other people, which isn't always a great idea, but I think it will have a lot of protections. I know people who are creating large language models, they put more effort into making sure that what it says is true, avoiding possible things that violate human skills. You could compare it to raising kids. We raise them with our knowledge, beliefs, values, and we hopefully trust them to be good citizens. We will become a hybrid species, biology and technology combined. So it's really a matter of trusting each other as we evolve. This is exactly what we've done in the past. We've created machines to help us do things like create buildings. I mean, you're in a building. Could you have created this building yourselves? Obviously, we use technology to advance our own ideas. These machines enhanced our abilities. We've learned to trust them. Now we're creating AI to extend our brains in the same way. In the 2030s, nanorobots will go into our brains non-invasively, without surgery, through the capillaries, provide wireless communication between the top layer of our brain, the neocortex, and the cloud, just the way your smartphone does that today with the cloud today. And we actually use this. 6 or 7 years ago, I asked somebody how many people have their smartphone, and I'd say maybe a third of the people raised their hand. I did this recently. Everybody raised their hand. And it said, who doesn't have their phone? Nobody raised their hand. So this is already extending who we are, even though it's separate. It will go inside us. It'll be no longer constrained by the size of our skulls. It'll be free to grow exponentially. We will expand our intelligence a millionfold. By 2045, which is when I believe the singularity will occur, the pace of change will be so rapid and its impact so deep that human lives will be changed forever. So with that, I'll wrap up and I look forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Question. Well, why don't you just declare victory, Ray? Certainly, by every computational measure, your law of exponential returns, accelerating returns, has prevailed, and our computer technology does exceed us in all these computational applications. Millions of applications have proliferated. And so I believe that, in fact, the singularity has happened, and yet it's scarcely impinged on us as human beings and our intrinsic natures at all. It's a separate path, as I have said from the first time we began arguing about this on Cobble Mountain. I think you're completely right about computers, but maybe the idea of putting the machines in our heads is not really going to be an advance that we want. We're going to be able to tap our computers to vastly expand our intelligence from that point of view without injecting them in our bodies. This is some kind of primitive image that has been envisaged, but I don't think it really probably is going to happen. But
well, first of all,
why am I wrong, Ray?
Well, first of all, most people actually don't accept the exponential growth. It seems quite obvious. You look at the data; it's very, very apparent. I mean, that graph shows complete exponential growth of computers over 80 years, and it's true of everything else. But people actually don't accept that. Economic models use linear ideas of the future. It's not actually putting it in our brain. It's actually just allowing it to talk to the cloud. The advantage of a cloud is it's really very hard to stop. You could blow up a whole data center and none of the data would be lost because it's replicated. Anytime you put something in the cloud, it's replicated right now dozens fold. It'll ultimately be hundreds fold. You could blow up several data centers and we'd still have all of the data. It's not putting it in our head. It's just allowing it, just the way this communicates with the cloud. All the data that you get from this is not in the phone. You could lose a phone, you can get back the data because it's all in the cloud. And we'll actually be able to do that with our own brain. So it's not putting it in there. It's a very thin, high-speed conduit to basically the power of the cloud.
Well, but is it unitary, Ray? Your image implies a sort of singularity of truth in the cloud, as if intelligence is some vast collective agglomeration that has attained some sort of perfection. Human minds, which are connectomes, as Sebastian Song of MIT has estimated, the connectome of the human brain takes 2 zettabytes to map, which is about the contents of the entire global internet.
Not really.
Intelligence gets dispersed, Ray. It's all over the world. It's independent but interdependent units. And this idea of a sort of singularity in the cloud, I think there's going to be an explosive multiplication of singular intelligences.
Well, if you take one person, that one person doesn't know everything. In fact, they know very little. Even if you take somebody like Einstein, he knew a lot of things about.
Like Kurzweil.
He knew certain things about physics, but he didn't know things in philosophy and psychology. What we really want to master is everything that all human beings have done. That's what large language models can do. You can ask it anything, and it will give you a very intelligent answer. One person is actually fairly limited. We want to actually harness everything that people have done. Now, we can do that already. Large language model is one way of combining the knowledge of lots of people.
It's a search engine.
We'll have a more intelligent way of doing that as we go forward.
Any questions?
There's a question over here.
Is this on?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm a big fan of Google, and I couldn't get out of my house without Google Maps. And I think all this sounds really exciting, but I'm much more concerned with the next year or two. I was wondering, with the advance now that we are able to record and document ephemeral messages and postings and videos, I wanted to know if there's any hope that we can keep Google and Facebook and YouTube neutral in our politics and our elections next year.
Yeah, well, looking at large companies, not just Google, but they actually spend more time trying to control it and maintain truth in what it says than in creating the technology itself. We've actually spent, for example, 25 years mastering search engines. That actually rates quite high in being truthful. So one way of making large language models truthful is to put everything it says through a search engine and make sure that it's accurate. Now, what's accurate and what's not is people have different ideas. I mean, you can go through the United States and people have some very radically different ideas. So it's hard to do anything that everybody would say is accurate because people have different ideas about what's accurate. But they are getting better. Large language models are actually better than humans. The reason that we have what's called hallucinations in large language models is because it learns from people, and people are not really accurate
That's
at all.
that's
So,
quite an admission, Ray, that that if people go awry, it intoxicates the large language models, and we're going to blame the failures of the singularity on the people who have created it and continue to maintain it and contribute to it.
right, but what do you think about search engines? They're generally considered quite accurate. As we do polls, people actually rely on search engines, and we're actually now testing what a large language model will do based on search engines.
Yeah.
So it'll have the accuracy of search engines, which are actually pretty good. So large language models will become more accurate, and they already are becoming that way. And that's one of the reasons that it takes time to put them out, is to test their accuracy.
Okay,
But creativity always comes as a surprise to us, Ray. Information is fundamentally surprising bits, as you know. And,
Actually,
yeah.
if a large language model knows everything that people
just
know, that's not everything,
stay there.
because we don't know everything. In fact,
Yeah,
most
right.
of the things we'd like to know, we don't know. How about some compound? If you give that to a person, it'll eliminate the possibility of cancer. We can see that that's possible, but we don't actually have it.
Yeah.
But we will find it in the way that I said. I believe that'll happen over the next few years for many major diseases. But we don't know everything.
Yeah,
and
right.
Scientific progress is going to actually accelerate using the type of methods that we can now use with these large event models.
Okay, I thought
more
this might,
questions?
hold on one second, I thought this might provoke some questions. We do have a queue, so I'd ask you to be brief. One other quick correction, this is to, the book comes out June 2024. So when you use the QR code, they'll be in touch with you, you get a free copy of the book.
This is by your
Yeah.
Ray's new book.
Ray's new book. So that'll be available June 2024 if you fill out the subscription form at the QR code. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, Ray, I'm Heidi. Can you hear?
Yeah,
you hear?
he can see you.
Oh, okay. So anyway, I am clearly a female. So I got very interested in where science got stuck and if girls could advance that. For the last 20 years, I've run a think tank with girls around the world studying nature as if nobody studied it. So this is what my challenge and my question to Ray is. I believe the true singularity is not merging with the machine, that it is harnessing unharnessed technology in our own brain. Our own brain is the most spectacular technology made. So we discovered, as girls, a new language to use parts of our brain that are unharnessed. I'm interested, this language is about becoming more alive, not living longer. It is not a language of time-space. So my question is, would you be interested in learning a new model of the mind and how to use parts of your mind that men have not cracked yet?
That's a provocative question too, so go ahead,
Well,
Ray.
I mean, what we have in our brain is based on what other people have discovered. We've all heard of special relativity. We wouldn't know that if we didn't have technology that could harness that and we could learn from it. If you go back 1,000 years before people had written language, people didn't really know that much because they weren't able to share insights. So even though a human being would have an insight, another human being wouldn't know about it because we didn't have the means of communicating it. So just filling up our own brain with things that are true requires technology. But technology is not something different from people. Large language models make connections between two different facts. It's the same thing that happens in our brain.
And what if we're capable of more than we've done? That's my question. What if a girl team found more? Would you be interested in learning how to use parts of your brain that men have not harnessed yet?
Well, that sounds very useful. I'd be interested to learn
Okay.
what you've
Send
learned
you-
about
Thank
that.
you.
School.
Okay, we'll go on to the next question. Go ahead, sir.
Steve.
Hello, my name is Steve Trost. I'm with Oklahoma State University. I would like to get your thoughts on an alternative to the Turing test. My assessment is that AI cannot and will not rival human intelligence unless and until a large language model can unilaterally decide to ignore its node weights while consistently providing cogent responses.
Well, there's been a lot of discussion about whether the Turing test is a valid test. It's actually assessing whether or not a computer matches a human. So you have unenhanced human judges talk to both a computer and a human, and if they can't tell the difference, we say that the computer has passed the Turing test. We're actually finding that we need to dumb down computers. For example, if you put a large language model and you ask it anything, some obscure problem in philosophy, and it'll give you a very intelligent response to it, you'd know it's not a human because no human could know all that much. So we actually have to dumb it down. At the same time that we pass the Turing test, it'll also pass superhuman intelligence, knowing everything. It can process text at 1,000 times the speed of humans and so on. But there are certain things where large language models don't do what humans can do. For example, just the other day, I said, how many eyes are in the following sentence? And then I had a sentence with 2 quotes. Every single language model I tried actually answered the question with 2 more eyes than were actually there because it counted the eyes in the part of the sentence prior to the quoted part. Now we know how to fix that. There's lots of little things like that which you could trip up a large language model, which human beings can do quite accurately. So that's why I'm not saying we've passed the Turing test today. It's 2023. I believe we'll do it by 2029, maybe even a few years earlier. A lot of people now feel it will happen in the next couple of years. GPT-4 was actually assessed with the Turing test. It actually passed. I've actually felt when Turing wrote the Turing test in his paper in 1950, he didn't describe it very well. It's only a few sentences, and there's different ways of interpreting it. And so I felt we'd actually have a few years where people will be reporting that a computer has passed the Turing test, and it will take a few years until we actually assess that accurately.
Well, actually,
but-
humans, if they were appraising a computer, they'd use AI to detect whether the particular spiel it offered came from a human or came from a machine or some, as typical, humans using machines to amplify their intelligence where they need it. I think these are kind of categorical sort of tests that don't really apply to the difference between human minds and computational intelligence. But any case, that would be my caveat on that observation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
But
you.
we
There's
got
also
more
different
questions here.
Yeah, we'll make this the last question. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, I'm Mike Van Scoik, designer of machines. And machines, like we're talking about, it seems to me, well, I know, start with information that exists. And what humans can do goes far beyond that. We can conceive, design, theorize things of this sort, which I call abstraction, as opposed to intelligence, which is processing information. And we understand the mechanisms for doing that. We understand logic and ways, we understand neural networks and so on. And we can emulate them, and we make machines that can do it faster and better than we can do it ourselves. But machines, how do you make a machine that can invent things, conceptualize, and so on?
Well,
Who are you?
it
You
all
didn't
happens in
say
our
who you
brain.
were. Say who you are, so we get it on.
Mike Van Scoik. I'm Mike Van Scoik.
Thank you.
And an engineer, designed machines all my life.
Okay, go ahead,
Well,
Ray.
it all happens in our brain. Our brain has different connections. Large language models have the same type of connections. They can do the same thing we can do. They can do it much faster. So I gave the example where we tried every single possible way in which we could inhibit a COVID vaccine, and it did it in 2 days. If you left that to a human brain, it would never happen, because we can maybe test a few dozen things
May I
in
interrupt?
10 years.
May I
So,
interrupt?
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Okay.
so we can actually advance human knowledge at a much faster rate. And that's what's going to happen in the future. It's going to be a combination of our own intelligence with computers. It's all the same thing. That's the result of our having a brain that's smart enough to
Okay.
create technology.
Okay,
that can-
so
Thank you, Ray.
Wait.
That was an absolutely brilliant, encyclopedic presentation, and you certainly are a singularity.
can I
you.
just add 10 seconds worth here?
Yeah, just
we
go ahead.
understand the mechanisms that we're talking about and brains as we know them. We do not understand the mechanisms for inventing, why do we need language, abstraction. That's the point. We don't know the mechanism, and it isn't what we're working on now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, we're
Surprise!
learning a lot, we're learning a lot more about that.
Okay,
Thank you,
Ray.
Dr. Kurzweil.
We'll order your book and read it with enthusiasm. Thank you so much, Ray.
Thank you so much. Let's give him a
Great
round
to
of
be
applause.
with you, George.